here's a quick recap on the interview lighting session that we did earlier this week. And I wanted to start by reminding you why we light interviews. And the reason for that is really to try and set the tone of the film that you're trying to make. It might be that you're looking to get a consistent look across a number of interviews as part of your documentary, and it allows the audience to know what's important and what it is that they should be focusing on. Obviously, we can also use the light to kind of tell us a little bit about the interviewee. Are we lighting them in a way that makes them look more attractive, more powerful, perhaps more sinister? It's much the same as you might light a character within a dramatic film. We're just doing it in this instance for a documentary or an interview. Don't settle, if you only take one thing away from the whole session, don't settle for the light as you find it. You've got to take control. In this environment now, I've used some window light, but I've also turned the light off that is above my head, because I know that that makes the lighting in here more attractive. So don't settle for the light as you find it. Be prepared to turn lights on, turn lights off, close and open blinds and curtains, and just take some time to create the scene for the interview and for your film. Try and think about lighting the background and the foreground separately. So in some instances, the background of the interview will be extremely relevant to the story that's being told. A good example of this would be an artist's studio, where you might be able to see some of their work or some of their tools in the background. But also, you might want to have a completely plain background. If you're looking to have consistency across a number of different interviews, then you might choose to have a plain background. And if the story that's being told is a particularly emotional one or a particularly personal one, then having a plain background can help tell the audience to simply focus on the character and ignore everything that's around them. In a lot of environments and for a lot of subjects, window light is king. As I just mentioned, I'm being lit by a window here. It's a nice big window. It's only about a metre away from me, and it's providing a really nice quality of light. So if you can, get your subject close to a window, and ideally that will then bathe them in some nice, soft and directional light. One thing to be aware of, though, is to try and make sure the window isn't actually in the frame. It will usually be quite distracting if you do that. So because it will be the brightest thing within the picture. So try and make sure that you use the correct angles so that the window itself doesn't obscure anything within the frame. A lot of times you'll have access to these little small LED lights. They're fantastic, a really great tool, but don't necessarily think about using this as your main light, particularly if you have got access to a good quality window. They're quite a small light source, and so they're not necessarily that flattering. So instead, I would use this as a backlight behind my subject, maybe to separate them from the background, or I might shine it into the background if I'm trying to highlight something in particular that's within the scene. If you are going to try and use this as a main light, then ideally what we would do is we would find a nice neutral coloured wall to bounce the light off. That would give us a much larger and softer light source, very similar to the kind of light that you would get via a window. Of course, all these rules and tips are there to be broken, but they need to be done deliberately. You can't say that, oh, we used fluorescent light because that was the look we were going for, unless there's a reason that you wanted that fluorescent light. And that reason can't be just because that was the light that you had there, okay? It's about good quality planning and preparation. Experimenting with different types of light within different settings is going to give you the best opportunity. And one thing particularly important with interviews is to make sure that you've really got the camera and lighting nailed down before the interviewee steps into the room and is ready to be interviewed. The reason for that is that will make them feel more comfortable. It will make them realise that you are approaching this in a professional manner. And from your point of view as the interviewer, you aren't going to be worrying about camera and lighting. You'll be able to focus on what the interviewee has got to say, their story, and getting the very best answers out of them possible.